it's interesting that Gurdjieff said this more than 100 years ago, talking about you, about me, about us, really. So try to see that it's talking about us. So it's like 2 pages or so, page and a half. In the chapter To Awake, there is a book of aphorisms that has never been and probably never will be published. This book says, a man may be born, but in order to be born, he must first die. And in order to die, he must first awake. Another passage says, when a man awakens, he can die. When he dies, he can be born. What does this mean? To awake, to die, to be born represent 3 successive stages of a process. In the Gospels, there are often references to the possibility of being born. Several references are made to the necessity of dying, and many to the necessity of awakening or staying awake, as in, watch, for you know not the day and the hour. But these 3 possibilities, to wake or not sleep, to die, and to be born, are never presented as related concepts, despite the fact that their relationship is the most important thing of all. Being born relates to the first stage of the growth of essence, the beginning of the formation of individuality and the appearance of a unified and indivisible I. But in order to be able to realize or even begin to realize this, a man must die in the sense of becoming free from 1,000 petty attachments and identifications that keep him where he is. We are attached to everything in life. Our imagination, our stupidity, and perhaps more than anything else, our suffering. We must become free from this attachment to things, identification with things that keeps alive 1,000 useless eyes in us. These eyes must die in order that the greater I may be born. But how? They do not want to die. This is where the possibility of awakening comes into play, and that is awakening to our nothingness. To awaken means to realize our complete and absolute mechanicalness and helplessness. And it is not sufficient to recognize this intellectually. We need to see it in clear, simple, and concrete facts in our own lives. When we begin to know ourselves a little, we see many things that are bound to horrify us. When we see something that shocks us, our first reaction is to change it, to get rid of it. But however hard we try, no matter how many efforts we make, we always fail and everything stays the same. Here we realize our impotence, our helplessness, our nothingness. Or again, when we begin to know ourselves, we see that we have nothing that truly belongs to us. We see that everything we have regarded as our own, our views, thoughts, convictions, tastes, habits, even our faults and vices, none of it belongs to us. All of it has been either formed through imitation or borrowed ready-made from somewhere else. In seeing this, we may feel our nothingness. And in feeling our nothingness, we should see ourselves as we really are, not just for a moment, but constantly, never forgetting it. Being continually aware of our nothingness and our helplessness will eventually give us the courage to die, not only mentally, but in fact, by renouncing forever those aspects of ourselves that are either obstacles or unnecessary for our inner growth. These obstacles are first all of our false eyes, and then all the fantastic ideas about our individuality, our will, consciousness, our capacity to do, as well as our powers, initiative, determination, and so on. But in order to become constantly aware of something, we must first see it, even if only for a moment. All new powers and capacities for realization always come in the same basic way. At first, they appear in flashes at rare and short moments, then more often and for longer. And finally, after a great deal of time and effort, they become permanent. The same applies to awakening. It is impossible to fully awaken all at once. We must first begin to awake for short moments, a moment or two every now and then. However, after having made a certain effort, surmounted a certain obstacle, and taken a certain irrevocable decision, we must die all at once and forever. This will be very difficult or even impossible were it not preceded by a gradual process of awakening. There are, however, 1,000 things that prevent us from waking up, that keep us in the power of our dreams. In order to act consciously to awaken, we have to know the nature of the forces that keep us in a state of sleep. It must be realized that the sleep in which we exist is not like ordinary sleep, but is rather a kind of hypnosis, a hypnotic state that is continually maintained and enhanced. One would think that there were forces that derive some use or profit from keeping us in this hypnotic state and preventing us from seeing the truth and understanding our position. And a little bit more. There is an Eastern parable about a wealthy magician who had a great many sheep. He was also very stingy and refused to hire shepherds or pay for a fence around his pasture. So the sheep often wandered into the forest and fell into ravines. And above all, they ran away, for they knew that the magician wanted their hides and meat, and this they did not like. Eventually, the magician found a solution. He hypnotized the sheep. First, he made them think that they were immortal and that no harm would come to them when they were skinned. That on the contrary, it would be very good for them and they would enjoy it. Second, he suggested to them that he was a good master who loved his flock so much that he would do anything in the world for them. In the third place, he suggested that if anything were going to happen to them, it would not happen right away, or at least not that day. So there was no point in thinking about it. Finally, the magician made his sheep think that they were not sheep at all. To some, he suggested that they were lions, or elephants, or eagles. To others, he suggested that they were men, and to others that they were magicians. After this, he never had to worry about his sheep again. They never ran away, but waited patiently for the day when the magician would require their hides and meat. This parable is a good illustration of man's position. If we could really see and understand the horror of our true situation, we would be unable to endure it even for a second. We would immediately start trying to find a way out, and we would quickly succeed because there is a way out. The only reason we do not see it is that we are hypnotized. To awaken for men means to awaken from hypnosis. This is why it is possible, at the same time difficult. There is no organic reason for being asleep. We can wake up, at least in theory, but in practice, it is almost impossible. As soon as we wake up for a moment and open our eyes, all of the forces that caused us to fall asleep become 10 times more powerful. We immediately fall back asleep, all the while dreaming that we are still waking up or even awake. In our ordinary sleep, it often happens that we want to wake up but cannot. Sometimes we think that we are awake, but we actually are still asleep, and this may happen several times before we're finally awake. In ordinary sleep, however, once we are awake, we are in a different state. This is not the case with hypnotic sleep. There is no sure way to tell whether we have actually woken up, at least at first. We cannot pinch ourselves to make sure that we are not asleep. And if, God forbid, we have heard there is some way to tell whether we are asleep, our fantasy at once transforms it all into a dream. All right.